Chapter 4. A girl in my class is really hot. I'll be honest, when Jordan said school, I was thinking the American kind. You know, the doesn't have that many windows, kind of looks like a prison, why would you ever send your kids here kind of school I was used to. Logitz was beyond anything I could have ever imagined. I know that sounds ridiculous given that I was flying to the original version of the moon on a starship escorted by a space wizard, but seriously, it was that cool. We boarded a landing craft with a dozen other kids and adults, landing on their version of a helipad beside one of the large lakes. If their blue sun worked anything like Earth's, the lake was to the west, and to the east, the huge grassy area which had looked so flat from the sky circled around a big mound in the middle, with giant carved stones at the top. "When do we get to England?" I asked, thinking it looked like that Stonehenge place I'd read about in a book one time. "Huh?" Jordan perked. "What's England?" "The stones," I pointed. "Oh, those are the ruins of man," he said casually, like it was the most obvious thing in the world. "Which are... I don't know," he shrugged. "They've been here for like 1,000,000,000 years. Sometimes we have campfires in the middle." "You have..." I paused. "Hold on, how old is this place?" "Logitz?" He shrugged. "I think they had like the 11th or 12,000th year reunion last century." I could hardly believe it. Not even the pyramids were that old. "Hold on," I said again. "If the school is 12,000, how do you know the stones are 1,000,000,000? Carbon dating?" "What the heck is carbon dating?" he asked. "No, Wise Wyvern Davies asked them in the early days of Logitz. They told him." "They..." I started laughing. I could hardly believe I wasn't dreaming. I shouldn't have thought of sleep. As soon as I did, the largest yawn of my entire life boomed out of my mouth, and I became so lightheaded I stumbled backward toward the ground. "Whoa there!" Jordan caught me. "Can I?" I huffed. "Any chance I can get some sleep?" I doubted we were anywhere close to the same time zone as Portland, but if we were, I'd been awake for well over 24 hours. I was exhausted. Jordan smiled. "Look," he said, "you really shouldn't get in the habit of this, but..." He pulled out his wand and shoved it point blank to my forehead. "Defro." Almost immediately, a jolt of energy rushed through my body, like I had just eaten a decent breakfast after a good night's sleep. My jaw must have fallen again. "There you go," he laughed. "Like I said, don't make a habit of that. I know too many people who try that to stay up late and end up crashing pretty hard. And I mean hard. A buddy of mine tried it before finals last year and ended up asleep for the next week." "I'll keep that in mind," I replied, taking a deep breath of the freshest air I'd ever tasted. I took a look around. In every direction, low hills rolled with the greenest grass I could imagine. Every which way, the grass was interrupted by giant round ponds, almost like little lakes. Little waves bubbled toward the shore from the middles. I remembered what Jordan had said about Urto and its clones, and realized this would probably be what the moon next to Earth would look like, with water in every crater. As we walked past the ruins of man, a bright light hit me in the face, like I was suddenly transported to a snowy mountain, which honestly wouldn't have surprised me at this point. My eyes adjusted, and I realized we were staring at the brightest building I had ever seen. I didn't need an answer to my question, but it slipped out of my mouth anyway. "That's the school, isn't it?" Logitz was the whitest white you could imagine, with a spiderweb of black veins crisscrossing all around the outside like cracks in stone. If I hadn't been looking for it, I would have never even thought it was a building. It was a huge, shapeless glob of crystal, extending awkwardly in some places like whoever had built it was slapping more material on the side of it to make it bigger. When I looked closer, the strangest idea popped into my head. That the building itself was growing. If that was true, it had chosen 3 spots on its roof to grow faster than anywhere else, giving the building a few bulbs that kind of looked like towers if you squinted and used a little imagination. Unlike the windows on Earth, or even on the ship, the windows on the school were uneven, all different shapes, sizes, and levels, that it made it hard to even tell how big the building was. It was so disorienting, I thought about asking Jordan for another wake-up spell. At least I could tell what the doors were, even if they were all triangles. In front of what I guessed was the main entrance, a white bridge made of the same material jutted toward us over another one of the lakes. No, not a lake. This one was moving in one direction. Somewhere around the left side of the school, a small river was flowing counterclockwise from one of the lakes hidden behind it. It flowed flat until it hit the right corner of the building, then disappeared into a giant brown canyon that continued to circle around the back side. It wasn't until we were crossing the bridge that I realized what the river was. A moat. I touched the side of the bridge as we walked. It was hard like I had expected, but instead of being crystal, the stone was more chalky, even if none of it came off in my hand. It was bumpy, too, with sharp little ridges that scraped against my hand like concrete. The closest thing I could think to compare were pictures of coral reefs I'd seen after the oceans get too warm. They lose all their color and turn white just like this. At that thought, I put my hand away, remembering my other thought about the building growing. I'd really wanted a real door, but instead the big open triangle shimmered with a light blue wave of something. And as we followed the crowd through it, Jordan and I were hit with a quick blast of wind before the sound and atmosphere changed. I felt my jaw drop again. The inside of the school was somehow bigger than the outside of it. Not by much, but I could tell whatever was in this place couldn't possibly fit in the shape I'd seen beyond the door. As we walked in, the hallway split left and right, with a little courtyard ahead of us, like there wasn't enough grass around the school that the students needed more. Just to the side of the courtyard, a pair of staircases split up and down, leading who knew where. A couple of the groups went right, but Jordan pulled me left, leading down a corridor that looked like it was shrinking with every step. I thought it might be like one of those optical illusion tunnels, but the closer we got to the door at the end, the more the white walls and ceiling actually did start to shrink in on us. Trust me, I measured. Luckily, another tunnel zipped off to the right and grew back into a regular hallway, leaving me wondering how big that door really was. The new hallway squiggled like a really bendy S, with a few more triangle doors passing by us on our walk. At one point, we turned so far to the right that I couldn't believe we weren't walking in a circle, but the appearance of a bigger, open triangle leading into a big auditorium proved that we were somehow moving in a new direction. Even then, we just kept walking. My head was starting to ache from the brightness of the white walls. "Is this place supposed to be confusing?" I asked, not really expecting an answer. "Of course it is," Jordan said, still walking. "If you really need something, you'll know where to go." That shut me up again. After another few minutes of walking, which felt oddly similar to our journey on the ship, we finally stopped at a door. And when I say door, I'm not talking about the weird triangle portal things, or even the metal ones they had on the Carnarvon. I mean like a real, proper wooden earth door. "That's a door," I said. Jordan turned around like I had just asked the dumbest question he'd ever heard. Instead of answering, he looked at me for a few more seconds before turning back to the door and twisting the brass handle. Inside was a square room I immediately recognized as a classroom. A semicircle of circular desks surrounded a big rectangular one, behind which, writing on a big blackboard with what looked like glowing orange chalk, was a man so far out of his years I was expecting Jordan to introduce me to time travel. The man turned around, his eyes bright with wonder. "Mason!" he shouted, and I turned around expecting to see someone else in the room. It was just Jordan. "Mason memories. Is that anything?" "Who's he talking to?" I whispered. "Don't worry, he does that to everybody," Jordan answered before raising his voice to the other man to hear. "Athro! I gather this is the one Sinia sent you to find," the man said, putting down what I realized was his wand, a little metal stick no bigger than a pen. Way different than Jordan's, which was more like the kind I imagined. His voice had the same accent as the soldiers on the ship. As he walked over to me, I realized how wrong I'd been about his outfit at first glance. It was way weirder. He was wearing brown shoes with giant rubber heels like a boot. Above that, blue jeans about 4 sizes too big in every direction were held up around his waist with a bedazzled belt. His pudgy, and if I'm being scary honest, hairy stomach was exposed by a white shirt that cut off below his ribcage. But thankfully for everyone that would be behind him today, he had another shirt over this. A long-sleeve green and blue plaid thing, all capped off by the most oversized, could you even call it a baseball cap? Hat that I'd ever seen. Beneath that, frosted tips. "Pleased to meet you," he said, sticking out his first and pinky fingers at me. I looked at them for a long time before deciding to try the gesture myself, trying not to be rude. Instead, he pulled his fingers into a fist and parked it against mine. "Shrubbington, right?" I was amazed he remembered. Like I said, it's not the easiest name to remember. The fact he knew it as easily as he did made my skin prickle. Eric, I said, pulling my hand back. "Eric," he repeated, turning to Jordan. "E-man. Is that anything?" Jordan shrugged. "It certainly could be. Say, could you walk him down to the arena for me?" Our shuttle was behind schedule. Cygnus only has a few to catch up. Sure thing, my boy. The man smiled. Hold on, I said, starting to panic. You're just going to leave me here? Jordan nodded. It's urgent business, he said. Not every day you get to relay a mission from Planet H. The man's eyes lit up. So that's where they found you, he said in a way that made me feel like a science experiment. My red flags about staying with this teacher only went higher. Jordan, I said, but he held up a hand to stop me. I'll be gone 20 minutes at most, he said. And trust me, by then you'll be distracted by something else. We'll get along swimmingly, my boy, the man said, slapping my shoulder harder than I liked. Besides, it's only a minute or so down the hall. Before I could say anything, Jordan was leading the way out the wooden door and back down the shrinking hallway. Athro Rafe Floyd, he said, reaching his hand across awkwardly as we walked. To my pleasant surprise, this time he gave me a handshake. His name sounded so foreign to me, it took me a second to understand he was introducing himself. I only picked up the first word. Athro, I said. That's a cool name. Jordan started laughing. Not a name, my boy, Floyd corrected. Athro's a title. It means a teacher of sorts in the old language. It's how you refer to all the adults here at Logi's. I nodded, trying to hide my embarrassment. I really was in way over my head. Planet H, huh? Floyd asked me, distracting me. You know, it's always been a dream of mine to visit. As you can tell, I'm a fan. He gestured toward his clothes. I did my dispensation on it during my time at Brifinseth University. I'm currently working on a long-term lifestyle study of the 20th and 21st centuries. I started to understand his odd choice of clothes. So that explains 2001, he nodded. So far a great year. Tell me, have you heard of Britney Spears? I almost started laughing. Who? Her third album is about to hit shelves in October, he said, unfazed by my question. I'm just about to start September. That was over 100 years ago, I said. For you it may certainly feel like ancient history, he said. But to those of us who have studied it, there's more truth to be found in humanity's past experiences than we could possibly hope to achieve alone. Never forget that. Jordan stopped awkwardly, turning around with a smirk on his face before looking down at me. Athro Floyd teaches cultural studies, he said, winking. And you'll have to pluck the job from my cold Gamalian hands, Floyd said proudly. Jordan gestured to the staircase beside us. I'm up this way, he said. I'll see you guys later. Part of me wanted to protest, but the more optimistic part of me won out. I'd only known Jordan for a few hours, but I felt like my only friend in this new world was leaving me for good. Still, Athro Floyd was starting to grow on me, quirks and all, so I decided to walk on with a good attitude. Thankfully for my nerves, the arena wasn't much further. The hallway turned blue for a few twists, owing to an infestation of Erloquist bugs in the wires, apparently, which I couldn't tell meant real bugs or electronic ones. Honestly, it was probably both. Before opening up into a massive atrium the size of a football field. All around us, 3 floors of hallways circled in odd shapes and sizes, leading off into new parts of the school. It felt like we were standing in the center of a hive. I hardly had time to think, though, as Floyd continued on toward one corner of the mostly rectangular room. Just beyond this, the hallway came to a large triangle, so dark I couldn't see through. Floyd gestured me to walk through the portal, and with a deep breath I hoped he didn't see, I walked into the blackness. The word arena meant something a lot different on Earth, it seemed. For the first time in my space journey so far, I was kind of disappointed. It really wasn't much more than a high school gym. Rows of bleachers in different colors and patterns circled around what was more or less a basketball-sized gym floor. That was until I noticed the floor itself. We emerged onto it from center court, and at the very heart of the room, the surface was divided in 4. One corner was beige stone, much older and spookier looking than the white walls of the school. It was the only part of the floor lined with vents, which blew cold air up from the ground, scaring anyone who walked over them. Beside this was one I had to see for myself. I simply didn't believe the floor was actually ice. 6 or 7 grooves were cut at odd angles through the floor, letting warm water steam and cut through the ice, cracking it before leaving it behind and letting it freeze into new patterns. The third part of the floor was grass and moss, waving in little humps like a miniature version of the planet outside. In a few places you could see chips in the grass, showing the dirt and rocks underneath. Last was the scariest of all. Almost the opposite of the ice square, this section was black metal, so hot I could hear my footprints singe as I walked over it. In the center of the section, a word I couldn't read seemed to glow orange with the heat coming up from the floor. My fascination with the floor was taken away by the realization of how many other people were in the arena with me. At least 50 other kids, all 12 years old by my guess, were standing in a herd around the center of the room. Some of them seemed to know each other, and were talking with other kids around them. Others looked like they were trying to know each other, introducing themselves in that awkward middle school way. The last group, like me, looked terrified, unsure where they were, or even how to make sense of the world around them. With a sense of fear, I realized Athro-Lloyd had disappeared. Not abandoning me necessarily, but stepping aside to speak to another adult. This was where I was supposed to be making new friends. If my track record was anything to go by, things weren't looking promising. Everyone seemed to be waiting for something. Maybe a speech to get everybody situated and ready for their first day here on Selenia. Or were these other kids already from Selenia? That thought made me feel even lonelier. How many of them already knew magic? Was it possible at all that I would find someone else from Planet H? I mean, Earth? Wow, I was really starting to accept my new life that quickly. I looked down at my fresh t-shirt, realizing that, thankfully, I wasn't the only one in the room wearing one. That was a start, at least. And there was another kid off to the side in the grass section who was walked in by an adult. Okay, maybe I wasn't as alone as I thought. My view turned around the room, taking in faces as much as I could, trying to study who looked friendly enough for me to try. The pair of twins who had laughed at me outside were standing off to the side in the stone section, alone by themselves. A girl with straight brown hair was rocking nervously back and forth on her heels, twirling a piece of hair between her fingers before putting it in her mouth to chew on. Okay, I thought, taking a deep breath. At least I'm not that nervous. Then my eyes stopped, and I stood frozen with my mouth half open. Standing on the metal section, deep in conversation with two other boys, was the most beautiful girl I'd ever seen. I don't know what it was about her exactly, but something hit me as soon as I noticed her. She had dark brown eyes and stood as tall as the boys around her. Her curly brown hair pulled over one shoulder like a strap. You know that gag in cartoons where someone sees someone attractive and little cupids fly around their head? Maybe a few angels sing in the background while the air gets a little bit brighter? Yeah, it felt like that. I knew immediately the first person I wanted to talk to. That was until she noticed me staring. However red my face was, hers turned an equal shade of green with disgust. Her chin tucked back against her neck, recoiling. That didn't make me feel very good. "What are you staring at?" she asked. Her voice not really one I would describe as welcoming. Half the room heard her say it, and they all turned to stare at her, then at me. I was still frozen with my mouth open, my face turning redder by the second. It was quite possibly the worst start I could have had to meeting my new classmates. I didn't think it could get any worse. Then she shot a wall of flame at my face.